All right, welcome into Ball. He is ESPN's Tom Luginbill. I'm Ryan Brown. It is presented by MyBookie.ag. Code next round. What is up, Lugs? How are you today?
I am fantastic. I couldn't be any better, man. I just can't believe we're already into week 5. Like,
It's sad.
it's a blink of an eye, man.
I know. That first month, you
So
love. We wait for college football to get here, and that first month flies by. And then you get to October, and you're like, boy, the October games are so good. And then you get to November, and you're like, the November games are incredible, but I've only got a month of football left.
I know.
I hate looking at it that way, but you can't help but look at it that way.
No, I know, and that's what makes this regular season of this sport the best of any sport, because there are so few opportunities, man.
There really are, and the opportunities are fleeting. Some teams already eliminated. We'll discuss those as we look back at what happened last week. The show presented by MyBookie.ag. Code next round this week and this week only. 110% sign-on bonus. You make that initial deposit, get 110% bonus right there at MyBookie.ag. Code next round. Use it once and win. It is yours forever. You don't have to use it a million times, just one time. It is yours forever. MyBookie.ag. Code next round when you sign on. You're going to see Clemson this weekend at Syracuse. That is Luginbill's game, the early ABC game, Clemson at Syracuse. And it is not often that Clemson has played games where they know their shot at winning a national championship is going in September. But if we're looking at this honestly, they lost it Saturday against Florida State, a shot at a national championship.
They did, and to be honest with you, they outplayed Florida State for the vast majority of the game. And
the scoop and score killed them.
It just changed the momentum. I mean, if they were to continue driving there, and let's just say they scored a touchdown because Florida State couldn't stop them.
Nope.
It's 31-17, right? And Florida State couldn't run the football at all and became one-dimensional. But we talk about it so often, just a handful of plays. Sometimes it's not even a handful. And it caught up on the sideline with some coaching snafus for Clemson late in that game. I had some substitution issues where it looked like Wes Goodman and Dabo Swinney were at odds with what they were trying to do, getting the right personnel in the field. And then, so much is made about that call with Cade Klubnik on 3rd and 1 and, having the run pass option for it. And, I look at that in two ways. Number one, from the sideline, you don't give a play with an option in it. You run the football. And then I think the other side of it is you actually have to say to your quarterback, hey, you got to have better awareness than that. I mean, even if the option, the free access is out there, we just ran the ball for 9 yards with this individual. Just hand the ball off so we can get moving forward. And he's got to take some ownership of that, and he did post-game. So, like you said, before the month of October, Clemson's out of it.
Yeah.
And what will they do on the road against a 4-0 Syracuse team that actually has been a kind of a thorn in their side? They've been a pesky group, and they're not afraid of Clemson. And what type of mentality does Clemson have going in there? It's I don't know. Like, think about it, Brownie. This Clemson program has had so few individuals involved in it that have ever experienced, any type of failure or scrutiny or criticism. Like, what do you do? So it's going to be interesting to see how they take the field on Saturday.
I mean, but if we're honestly looking at the Garrett Riley hire, he was the hottest name in college football last year, and a lot of people thought he would come in, with Will Shipley at running back, with Cade Klubnik at quarterback, and it would almost look like TCU did last year. It hasn't been that smooth. I don't know what letter grade you would give it, and maybe it's unfair to give it a letter grade in September, but it hasn't been what I thought it would be with Garrett Riley there.
Well, no, neither has it been for me. And going into the Duke game, one of the questions I specifically asked Dabo Swinney prior to the game was, is this a collaborative effort? Is this Clemson-based principles offensively that you've had during your tenure with new leadership and some wrinkles from Garrett Riley, or was this an entirely new install? And this is the offense Garrett Riley's brought to Clemson. He said it was an entirely new install. But what's odd is it doesn't look like it.
No, it really doesn't.
They don't look any different than they looked a year ago or the year prior to that. And so I don't know if there's a tug of war there. I don't know if Dabo was being completely truthful. Obviously, he's an offensive guy. He's the head coach. He's probably going to want to have some input. But, yeah, there hasn't been this drastic difference in approach and different look to the offense. But I will say this. There were 2 or 3 plays that changed the game, but for the most part, Clemson was the better team on Saturday, but they didn't finish the game.
I mean, honestly, I'm an untrained eye. You know that, Lugs. I don't know football, but if I watched that game Saturday and you told me Tony Elliott and Jeff Scott were calling plays, I would have said, okay. You know, it
Right.
It feels a
Brandon
lot
Streeter.
like it. Yeah, right. Yeah, it feels a lot like it has for the last decade, honestly.
Yeah, there's no question. I mean, they didn't look like your Dolphins, that's for sure. Your 70-point
Few do.
Dolphins.
Few do.
And by the way, I don't know what that wizard is drawing up on the whiteboard during the week, but some of the stuff they're doing offensively is just he's changing the NFL right now. And not to get off point, but it got me thinking about it because, like, think about Garrett Riley and all the innovations, some of the things he and Lincoln and these guys have done and changed the landscape of college football. McDaniel's changing the landscape of the NFL.
And I'm here for it. I'll watch every bit of it. You know, the funny thing about that is Tua threw 2 left-handed touchdowns and 2 right-handed touchdowns. How many quarterbacks you ever see do that? You know, the two shovels.
Drake
shovels
May did it
right
last week.
Yeah, he did.
Drake
Absolutely.
May did it versus Pitt. I mean, that's when you know you're pretty good.
Yeah, you got a good athlete there. Yeah,
pretty good. Yeah.
Luginbill will be at Clemson and Syracuse coming up early slate on ABC. Ball presented by MyBookie.ag. Code next round when you sign on at MyBookie.ag. Get that sign-on bonus of 110% this week and this week only. Bet anything, anytime, anywhere. MyBookie.ag. Code next round when you sign on. Code next round at MyBookie.ag. Also, don't forget Lance'sLock.com. Lance gives you a lock every single day. He does a ton on the college football and NFL weekends. He's been red hot in football. You can get on board now, Lance'sLock.com. That is Lance'sLock.com. Daily, weekly, monthly, season-long packages. You sign up, you get winners. Take them to MyBookie.ag, Lance'sLock.com. All right, let's talk about the aftermath of the big game there in South Bend over the weekend. Ohio State scores on the final play of the game to beat Notre Dame. A lot happened on that final play. In fact, the final 2 plays. I guess let's start with the negative. I didn't understand Marcus Freeman's explanation. Okay, 10 guys on the field, I guess it happens, right? For it to happen twice in a row coming out of a timeout is inexcusable. But then he said we didn't want to get a penalty. What does a penalty do there? It moves the ball half a yard. I mean, I'll take half a yard. I'll take half a yard to have 11 guys on the field versus 10.
Absolutely. And at that point, does it really matter? Because at least you're going to have the right guy lined up in the right gap to defend against the run that they actually chose to run.
Right.
What they probably did is told their quarterback, Kyle McCord, hey, listen, get up there and count the numbers. If there's less to the left, let's go inside zone to the left. If there's more to the or less to the right, let's go. And there's this there's a principle in football that you never leave 2 consecutive gaps unmanned. That's impossible to do if you're playing with 10. So I think the hard part for Marcus Freeman to explain away in today's game, and he knows this, and he's owned it, is that with the staffing that a program like Notre Dame has, whether it's in the booth, how many eyeballs there are, administrative guys, analysts, GAs, on the field and from a bird's eye view perspective up top, that's just inexcusable. It cannot happen, and it certainly can't happen in that moment, in the most important moment of the game. But I'll say this, that was one hell of a football game.
It was a fun game, yeah.
2 really good physical teams, and it kind of went exactly how I thought it would because neither team had played anybody going into that matchup. But the talent between the 2 teams, I think it's pretty equal across the board. So the slugfest is kind of what I expected and really what it came down to.
You look at the positive for Ohio State. They obviously get the win. Now, there were still some of their warts that showed in that game. You know, Kyle McCord is a guy that has caught a lot of criticism this year. He played better against Western Kentucky. He led the scoring drive. And a lot of people are saying maybe the worm has turned. I wonder how different the discussion would be if Notre Dame gets that interception, though. I mean, that interception goes right through the defender's hands.
Yeah.
You know, in that case, the game ends with your quarterback throwing a pick. And I just wonder if he would still be getting the same amount of praise. But guess what? Interception goes through the guy's hands. He leads the scoring drive. Are you more of a Buckeye believer coming out of that game, or is it about what you thought going in?
It's about what I thought going in, but I would say that I am a little bit more of a believer. And it's not so much about Kyle McCord and the offense. It's really about the defense. And I say that because, you know, our broadcast crew 2 years ago had Ohio State, I want to say twice, I think. And at that time, they were receiving a ton of criticism for, you know, how they were playing on defense and the fact that this didn't look like an Ohio State defense. But people didn't realize at that time, JTT was a freshman.
Right.
Jack Sawyer was a freshman. Denzel Burke was a freshman. Tyleik Williams was a freshman. Like, they were playing all of these young, super talented guys. And then at that time, Steele Chambers was a sophomore and Eichenberg was a sophomore. Like, you could see that once these guys grow up, they're going to be really, really good. And I think we're seeing that now. So while they received a lot of criticism in the offseason for what type of defensive team are we going to see, I think we're going to continue to see one that gets better and better and better because those guys have played a ton of football right now. You're right about Kyle McCord, because if the ball's intercepted, we're having an entirely different narrative and a different conversation. But post that play, you could also make an argument that he ripped some throws were like, I'll give him this. He wasn't hesitate. He didn't hesitate. He didn't let that almost massive snafu cause him to be indecisive. I think that says something about him. He was able to handle the moment. He forgot the last play, moved on to the next one. I think there's a lot of positives you can take away from that. I thought he had the latter part of the fourth quarter. He kind of really started to grow up.
They are so good at receiver, and that's going to help any quarterback. I look at them. Michigan has not been tested. I don't know, frankly, when those tests will start for Michigan. It might be November before they're even tested. They get Nebraska this week, and Nebraska's down 2 running backs, and it's been a tough season for Matt Rule in Nebraska to get things started so far. Penn State, I really don't know how tested they are. They've played West Virginia and Iowa. We're going to get to Iowa in just a little bit, but that is such a one-dimensional Iowa team. It's hard for me to figure out. I mean, obviously Ohio State's got the best win of any of those teams by far and away. Yeah. It's hard for me to compare those 3 teams that are going to have to play this round robin in their division, which might ultimately be for a college football playoff berth, just because I haven't really seen Michigan and Penn State tested. When you watch on film and you're just looking at the personnel, do they look a lot alike? Or are those teams on equal footing, you think?
I think they're all on equal footing, and Penn State's the team that we're probably not giving enough credit to for their overall talent profile. Now, there will be people out there that will say, well, that's all fine and dandy, but when is James Franklin going to go beat Michigan and Ohio State at the same in the same season? And this may be the opportunity, because the schedule for Penn State, if you look at their road contests outside of really one game, it's not a hostile environment. They're not playing in places that are daunting places. That gets to happen at home. They've got NFL players at just about every level. Drew Aller has played fantastic to this point. In fact, there's guys that have an ability level and you say, wow, look at all that ability. And then you see Joe Milton, or look at all that ability. And then you see DJ Uyunglele. Drew Aller's ability is starting to match up with the productivity. And so that's a positive for Penn State. And listen, I know Penn State can't get the length of their pinky finger on offense, but they don't have chumps on defense.
And, Iowa, you mean Iowa?
Iowa, excuse me. Iowa.
Yeah.
They don't have a bunch of bums running around on defense. And so I know Iowa turned the ball over a bunch. There were short fields for the Penn State offense, but you put up 31 points on Iowa, you're playing pretty good offensive football.
Do you know, and I may screw this stat up, Dunaway gave it on our show the other day, that the head coach with the longest streak of 30-plus points in a game is James Franklin right now, which is shocking because he's never been really good on offense. It has been one of the things that's plagued him a little bit. So they've been really average on offense. But I don't think I think that was the stat. It's the team with the longest streak of scoring at least 30 in a game is currently Penn State. And that is really, really difficult to believe.
What's the number?
I don't know. And you would immediately say, well, what about USC? But remember, they scored 24 in the Pac-12 championship last year against Utah.
Yeah.
There are a lot of teams you would throw out there, but they all fall to the side. I'd have to go look, and I wish I'd written the number down when Dunaway gave it, but I was blown away because you immediately start thinking, and maybe it's just Power 5 teams. I'm probably completely screwing this stat up. But the fact that any of those stats would include James Franklin gets your attention, because there are times he's been really, really average on offense, if not below average on offense.
Yeah, and listen, I mean, whether you're playing with Trace McSorley, who's a really, really good player for them, took him to a Fiesta Bowl, or you're looking at
Sean Clifford had him in the Rose Bowl last year.
Yeah, Sean Clifford had him in the Rose Bowl, but I think most people looked at him and said, man, this guy's a guy that's not going to screw it up. He's serviceable. You can count on him, so on and so forth. He hadn't had a Drew Aller, though. He hasn't had a guy that looks like he can actually play and can do physical things with talent that are really, really special. And maybe that's the difference now for James Franklin and Penn State.
Yeah. I'm going to Google it, Luke's consecutive
All
games
right.
of 30 points. It is, I mean, it's crazy because I wish Georgia and Michigan are a lot alike. I mean, I think they're both good. I don't know if Georgia is as good as they've been over the last 2 or 3 years, but they're still really good. I think Michigan is really good, but they've not played. I mean, Georgia's at least played a conference game. Michigan has played Rutgers. Georgia's at least played South Carolina, and they trailed at halftime. So you finally are like, okay, 14-3, they're down to South Carolina at the half. I just don't know about either one of those teams. I think they're both really good teams, but you just don't know till you see them get tested.
Well, you don't, and Michigan and Ohio State and Penn State are obviously all going to get tested by one another. But with Georgia, I mean, the bottom line is every time they take the field, at least during the regular season, they're going to be the superior team. Like, they may not have to have their true A game or play a complete 4 quarters to beat somebody just because they're so talented. And the problem with that is they can look lackluster at the same time,
right,
and still win the game. Most people can't look lackluster and win most games they play. And so if I'm a Georgia fan, or I'm a fan of the SEC, I'm looking at Georgia taking the field every time, getting everybody's best shot, meaning that whoever they play is going to have to play their absolute best, and Georgia's going to have to find a way to screw it up. They might not have to be at their best. I mean, that's a reality until they get to an SEC title game.
All right, here it is from the Big Ten release this week. Penn State scored 30 points for the 11th consecutive game, so it's only 11. It's the second longest streak in program history, the longest active streak in the FBS. So it's everybody. It's not just Power 5. And 11 is not a huge streak, but apparently it's significant because they're the only team that's done it right now.
Right. Yeah. But I mean, again, I think it also goes to show you just how hard it is to score that many points consecutively, because you're going to have a day where maybe things aren't clicking. You're going to have a day where you miss and you have to settle for field goals instead of touchdowns in the red area. It's not all going to be, rainbows and unicorns, but that number probably pretty difficult to achieve.
Yeah, I guess so. 11. And I don't see, I mean, I'm with you. Aller he's played really, really well. He was very efficient in that game, though he didn't put up a ton of yards. I don't know when that number is going to stop for them. I mean, it obviously will, but it's going to take a pretty good defense to hold them under 30, the way they run the ball and the way Aller could throw.
Well, look at that conference right now. I mean, outside of Michigan, Penn State, and Ohio State, are any of them any good? I mean, it's really, really poor right now what we're seeing out of the rest of the Big Ten.
It is ball. He is ESPN's Tom Luginbill. It's presented by MyBookie.ag. Code next round when you sign up for MyBookie.ag. This week only, get a sign-on bonus of 110%. You make a deposit, they match it 110% at MyBookie.ag. That's when you use code next round. Bet anything, anytime, anywhere. MyBookie.ag. Code next round to make sure you get that sign-on bonus. Also, Rhoback.com. You see me wearing the Rhoback right here, TNR20 at checkout, and you get 20% off your first order at Rhoback.com. Great quarter zips like this one. The hoodies are the softest there that they make. Also, golf shirts right there at Rhoback.com, TNR20 at checkout to save 20% on your first order. Why are these coaches so mad, Lugs? It was like we got it all weekend. Ryan Day was pissed at Lou Holtz after the game. Dickert at Washington State was pissed at ESPN for breaking up the Pac-12. As I remember the story, Fox is the one that broke up the Pac-12. Yeah. Dan Lanning was pissed at Colorado. Everybody, all these coaches were so angry this weekend.
I know. I'll tell you the like, I loved Ryan Day's reaction, because I think if there's one thing that will ruffle the feathers of a coach when you're talking about their team, is if you insinuate in any way, shape, or form that they're soft.
Yeah.
You cross that line, I don't care if the guy's 86 years old or 36 years old, you're going to get a reaction out of a coach, especially when you go on the road and you get the win versus a very physical team in Notre Dame.
Yeah.
Everybody keeps seeming to forget that ESPN offered to buy the Pac.
I know. It's like
and revamp the whole thing.
Yeah. The one league the ESPN doesn't really have any involvement in is the Big Ten. That's who broke up the Pac-12.
Yeah. So, But I will say this in regards to Coach Corso's comments, and I don't want to say that this is what he meant, but what did he say? The nobody watches bowl or something
That's
like
right.
that?
Yeah.
Was he referencing though the Pac-12 network, or was he referencing the two teams playing each other?
I don't know. And Kirk Herbstreit tried to explain it, and I didn't really understand Kirk's explanation. But I mean, everybody involved says he didn't mean what Dickert thought he meant. And you know this. Look, for what we do for a living, on that show, Coach Corso's probably talking for an hour, and you're going to say things that come out wrong. They,
tell me, I know.
I know you. you mean them in one context, and then once they get distributed, the context is lost.
Yeah.
You know that as well. So that's going to happen, and I'm sure it's what happened with Coach Corso. I don't. Lee Corso. I don't think there's a mean bone in that guy's body. He loves college football. I don't think he meant anything by that.
No, and I will say this: it was one of the sneaky going into the weekend.
Yeah,
it was one of the sneaky best games on TV between two really good teams, and coming out of the weekend, it proved to be. If it was just me throwing out a hypothetical guess, I would say you're referencing the Pac-12 network, and nobody can find it. Right? Yeah. You can't find it. You won't be able to watch the game. Nobody will watch because they can't watch the game.
Right.
I think Coach Corso, there we go, knows full well that those two teams are really, really good. And by the way, speaking of that, Washington State is no one to be trifled with.
No.
They are a problem.
The Apple Cup has had some crappy games over the years. And
Not this year.
And I don't know what the future of that rivalry is. I don't know if it'll go the way of Bedlam once we start separating all these teams. But boy, this one's going to be fun because Michael Penix and Cam Ward are not just two of the best quarterbacks in the Pac-12. They're two of the best quarterbacks in the nation. Like, I think Penix is the best QB in the nation right now. I would give him the Heisman Trophy today. If we voted at the end of September, Michael Penix would walk home with it. To see those two play one another is going to be phenomenal.
Like I said on my radio show last week, I honestly believe that Michael Penix Jr. throws incompletions just because you're supposed to have a couple.
I guess so. I don't know.
Right? I mean, I think he's literally going, well, I can't go 27 to 27. Nobody will believe it. Let me just throw a couple into the dirt. Let me throw one over there into the seventh row, right?
Is this – look, we never saw this at Indiana, and I know quarterbacks can develop, but – Kalen DeBoer must be a quarterback coaching wizard to get this out of him.
Dude, let me tell you. So, Ryan, I'm not kidding you when I tell you this. I may have already shared this with you. Do you remember the Indiana team? He was the offensive coordinator that beat Penn State, and Michael Penix, the quarterback, he reaches out. The stretch, and he hits the pylon.
Right.
Then, and they have a really good year. I think it was like week 9 or 10 or whatever, he tears his ACL. That next year, our crew had them like 3 times. And I'm not kidding, Ryan, when I tell you, I am not exaggerating. It was the worst player we saw at quarterback by a long shot the entire season.
It's insane.
He could not function. He literally couldn't function. And I don't know what's brewing in Seattle. I don't know what type of sorcery Kalen DeBoer has access to. But what he's done with that young man and the confidence now that is now reinstilled in him is nothing short of a miracle in my eyes. I wish most people could have saw what we saw because it would exacerbate what everybody's seeing now, what everybody's so impressed with at Washington. It would exponentially make it even that much more impressive. But by the way, why? So you think Dan Lanning's mad or you think Dan Lanning's having fun?
Oh, he came across – the halftime interview, the old, I hope everybody that was watching the first 3 weeks is watching now. He just seemed, I don't know. He just seemed so on edge and like you're destroying Colorado. You're picking their bones right there. It was wild watching it. And then this whole, like this Hollywood production they've released, this 5-minute video showing all the disrespect they got from Colorado. I'm just like, man, this game has not mattered for 10 years when you've been in the same conference all this time. Now you're leaving conferences, and it's like one of the biggest rivalries we've got in football, and you're not even going to play anymore.
Well, I know that 5-minute clip reel that Oregon just released of all of Colorado's guys chirping and this and that. I guarantee you that was happening in front of Dan Lanning, in front of coaches. They were watching it. They were seeing it. It had to have lent to his pregame interview that they ended up then airing later on as they're shellacking Colorado. Here's what I think, honestly, this is a byproduct of the approach that Deion Sanders has chosen to take, because it's a double-edged sword, right? You have taken the college football world by storm. You have branded this program in every single foot that you walk, every single minute of the day, you are putting it out there, right? And I think it's fair to say a lot of people are like, enough's enough. It's oversaturation, right? But that's not how they operate at Colorado. So Deion's going to do that stuff, and they're going to push it, and they're going to push it, and they're going to push it. Well, the other side of that is you're not going to make a lot of friends along the way, because they're going to get tired of it. And then when they get an opportunity to play you and they've got the better team, now all of a sudden the mindset's a little bit different. There's a little bit more intent there. Right, wrong, or indifferent, this is kind of what you get. I mean, I don't know if you saw on Instagram, Ryan, but like, you're Colorado, you're going on the road to take on Oregon. There's not even a comparison between the two teams. It's not even close.
No.
And Colorado brings this massive throne. Have you seen this on social media?
I've seen the throne, yeah.
Their turnover.
The turnover throne, yeah.
They bring it on the road.
Yeah.
And they're lugging it around and putting it in the stadium at Oregon. Like, well, how do you think that team's going to react?
Yeah.
What did you think that Oregon team and those coaches were going to do when they walk into their own field and see Colorado's brought a throne and put it in the end zone? I mean, this was bound to happen. It was inevitable.
Yeah. So let me ask you this, because you're on the field every week. I assume you're down there pregame watching the teams warm up. I mean, it might not reach the level it reached in Colorado, Oregon, but there's always chirping back and forth at that situation, right?
Yeah, I think so. I don't know if I've seen it, though, from a team and a group of players that didn't seem to quite to have the awareness of how outmanned they were.
Right.
And I get it. That's the mentality right now at Colorado, and it's the I believe, and they're gonna have swagger, and they're gonna have confidence. But then there's also reality. Like, it's one thing to just go out there, warm up, play your game. Like, that's not who they are. That's not what they are going to do. So I haven't, in many instances, been on a field where, like, I'll give you a prime example. The Sugar Bowl last year, Kansas State and Alabama. You stepped onto that field in pregame warm-up, and it was a no contest the moment both teams came out. You looked at Alabama, and
you compare sizes, and it's nowhere close. Yeah.
I mean, you're looking at them going, "Come on," right?
Right.
But you didn't see Kansas State getting chirpy. You didn't see them, jawing and this and that, because they knew. Like, they knew they were outmanned. Right. They're going to go out and try to play their best game, do the best they can, but they're not dumb. They know it. There's a part of what happened Saturday is almost as if there wasn't much awareness. And listen, I appreciate the confidence, and I love what they've done to this point. But, like, this is a team that cannot run the ball. They are atrocious in the offensive line and the defensive front. They can't stop the run. Their best player is injured, and the entire roster is basically being operated by 4 players. And we talk about it every week.
Yep.
And now they're playing a team with 2 and 3 deep across the board in elite quarterback play. Like, this was going to happen at some point. But now here's the beauty of it, Brownie, is if you watch USC on defense, this sucker might be a game in Boulder this week.
Oh, I think there'll be some scoring. Yeah. I think there'll be some scoring. Yeah.
Can they keep Shedeur Sanders upright? Can they keep him healthy? Because they can't run. I mean, they cannot run the football.
Right.
So sooner or later, something's got to break here. But from what I saw of SC on defense and what we've seen of SC on defense going all the way back to the beginning of last year, or really going all the way back to Lincoln Riley coach teams at Oklahoma, this is what they are. Well, Nebraska is a much better defensive football team than SC. And Colorado scored on them. Yeah. So that's going to be interesting to see.
And you'll have to score to stay caught up. I will say this yet again, and this was a blowout. The TV business, Luginbill. You've worked in it for a long time. Blowouts are bad for TV ratings. I don't care what the names of the jersey. It was still number 1, 10 million viewers. It had more people watching that than two iconic brands, Ohio State and Notre Dame, going down to the final play of the game. It blows my mind.
It is. I mean, it's crazy. But again, that's what's been created by Coach Prime and the team and their early success. And like I said last week, two things can be true at once. You can give them a lot of credit for how they've gotten to this point, and you can still point out the fact that there are some major flaws with that team. And now we'll see how they respond. I mean, that's the thing, because again, they got to go to Utah, they got to go to Washington State. I mean, Stanford and ASU, I think those should be wins for Colorado, which could get them to 5. Yeah, could get them to 5. But it's going to be difficult to get. I think they got to go to Oregon
Arizona.
State, Arizona. But also, I think they go on the road to Oregon State too. So like those scheduling gods didn't do them any favors.
It is ball presented by MyBookie.ag. Code next round when you sign on at MyBookie.ag this week, you get that sign-on bonus of 110%. That's just free money from our friends at MyBookie.ag. Code next round gets you that now. That initial sign-on, you get 110% at MyBookie.ag right there in your account. Play it right away. Win once. It is yours forever at MyBookie.ag. Code next round for that. And don't forget Lance'sLock.com. Daily, weekly, monthly, season-long packages. He's been tearing it up in football. You can get on board right now. Get those picks that win. Take them to MyBookie.ag. That's Lance'sLock.com. All right, the Devil's Workshop this week is in Durham, North Carolina. We talked some about Notre Dame. They now go on the road to this surprising Duke team. You've been there. You've seen Mike Elko's Duke team. They're about a 5.5-point underdog at MyBookie.ag. You know, there's this old coach's cliche, you can't let somebody beat you twice.
Right.
And the way they lost that game against Ohio State, I think there's fear of that happening for Notre Dame this week at Duke.
Well, I think we'll be able to get a real sense of the maturity of Notre Dame's football team. And I'll say this, let's not forget Sam Hartman played against this Duke team.
Yeah.
He's going to be able to give a firsthand account of, guys, here's what we're in on. Don't, this is not a team to be trifled with. I think that helps in Notre Dame's corner. You go on the road. I was shocked at how loud it was. I'm not kidding. For the size of that stadium, yes. For the size of that stadium, I was stunned. It will probably be even louder with more people standing around the top in the upper concourse where they don't have seating, but they have standing room only. The thing with Duke is they're so much better on defense than people give them credit for, especially up front. Like, you'd think Duke doesn't have guys in the defensive front. Well, yeah, they do, and they got several of them. They did a really good job in the transfer portal. Mike Elko really got some length at corner, brought him over from Texas A&M, and they've got a lot of veterans. Like, you take, like, this is my play sheet for Clemson and Syracuse coming up, and I always try, because we're in this world of college football where everybody's playing with a freshman or a true sophomore or a redshirt sophomore, this and that. You look at this sheet for Duke, and it's RSR.
Yep.
RJR, meaning redshirt senior, redshirt junior, and then a bunch of GRs, graduates. Yep. This is an old, experienced Duke team that has played a ton. They've experienced failure. They've tasted success, and now they're hungry for some more of it. So Duke will be ready. And I think, like the Duke-Clemson game, Notre Dame's going to have to come in, and if they make mistakes like Clemson did, they'll lose.
It's a little bit like, and this sounds like an insult to Duke, and I don't mean it this way, but it's a little bit like in basketball. You'll get that mid-major team that has a really good player, which is what Riley Leonard is. Mm-hmm. And then they got 4 guys around him that are all seniors, and they've played 400 basketball games together, and they're good because of that. Yep. Duke's got some talented guys. They got a really good quarterback in Riley Leonard and
3 receivers.
And 3 receivers. But to your point, they just got a bunch of experience around them, guys that have seen a lot. Not a lot's going to catch them by surprise. They know where they're supposed to be, when they're supposed to be there. They're coachable. I mean, it's the ingredients you would want in any football team. But to your point, you almost never get anymore in college football.
Jim Harbaugh said to me one time when he was at Stanford, and we were kind of talking about like in recruiting with the parameters that you have if you're at a Northwestern or a Stanford or a Duke or a Wake or Vandy, what have you. And I was like, how have you done this? What's been the recipe for success? And the answer he gave me was, I think, really interesting. He said, there are lots of guys out there that want to be an engineer or a heart surgeon, or they want to be a CP, a CFO of a company, and they like football. Okay,
Yeah.
great. And they look at football and they say, football, because of scholarship, can get me to that level. He goes, what we've tried to really do is find the guy that wants to be the architect or the heart surgeon that cannot live without playing football.
Right.
Like, football is so important to that person that one day when it ends, that person's going to go into a deep, dark depression. And it made such sense to me, because that really is the difference. When you have those smart guy teams, their aspirations and their outlook is 40. It's a 40-year vision. And that's not necessarily the case everywhere.
Yeah.
How do you find that guy that takes football so seriously that if you took it away from them, they'd be crushed? And I think that's what Duke has. I think that's what Mike Elko has.
Yeah. It's a fascinating game, Duke and Notre Dame. It is primetime ABC, and game day is there. First time ever, I think, at Duke.
First time ever. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's cool, by the way, like the Duke student section, they had these like headbands.
Right.
And they had blue horns sticking out of their head,
Yeah.
but they light up.
Yeah.
So they all dress in black. So when you look at it from the television perspective, the high camera on the sideline, it just looks like a bunch of blue Christmas lights everywhere. And it's all the students' headbands. It's really cool.
Yeah. Do you do a conference call with Holly Rowe this week to tell her how to manage the field rush? They're like, look, Holly, I've been there. Let me tell you how to get to the winning coach in the event that Duke wins this thing, because your video went viral on how you did.
Yeah. Well, she's been doing this a lot longer than I have, and she's been down there as a reporter, and I generally haven't been, but that is a part of my duties, so I've learned that along the way. She's probably done it a heck of a lot more than I have. She probably has a lot more help getting to the handshake than I would have week in and week out. But I will say this: if I were to give a bit of advice, where I made the mistake was, you assume when that happens. I think I shared this with you off the Clemson game. You assume that there's going to be a Gatorade bath. There's going to be hugs with the players. There's going to be handshakes with assistant coaches. And so you're going to come off that sideline kind of slowly and then trot out to the handshake. Freaking Mike Elko takes off.
He sprinted, yeah.
Yeah, so I take this horrible angle. And once I realized I had to get my head on a swivel over there, so that's what I would tell her. I was like, don't anticipate him having any celebratory process near the sideline. Anticipate him going right to that coach and then meet him halfway. You're still going to have to get through everybody, but she'll do just fine.
Oh, so good. All right, mybookie.ag brings you ball each week. Code next round at mybookie.ag to get that sign-on bonus of 110%. Your initial sign-on deposit, they're going to match it 110% with that bonus at mybookie.ag. Just free money from them when you use code next round at mybookie.ag. All right, worst unit, Iowa's offense or USC's defense. They were both on full display Saturday night. Iowa's offense produced 4 first downs on primetime NBC for the whole world to see against Penn State. 4 first downs for Iowa's offense, under 100 yards of total offense for Brian Ferentz. And USC's defense couldn't stop Drew Pine and Arizona State. Those units are suspect at best, or actually they're beyond suspect, and both of them showed up Saturday night.
Yeah, and I'll tell you, against the Arizona State defense too, and my comments about Colorado's overall depth and being one of the worst, Arizona State's up there. They're one of the worst too. And for them to do that to SC's defense is mind-boggling to me.
It really is.
It is, but I do know that SC has better athletes than Iowa does.
Yeah.
Athletes.
I agree.
So I would say Iowa's offense is worse than SC's defense. Now, we could sit here and compare statistically, like where would the total offense be and where would the total defense be between the both teams. But I know athletically, when I look at SC, I may see poor play, but I don't see slow players. I don't see guys that look like they may not belong. When you watch Iowa on offense, you're trying to find somebody that you say, all right, when they break the huddle, I'm scared of that guy.
I fear this guy, right?
Yeah, they just don't have it.
Well, and which almost makes Southern Cal more puzzling, right? Because Iowa, I at least know with Iowa, you're right. They got no players, and the offensive coordinator is the son of the head coach who refuses to fire him. So it's like, I know they're bad, but at least I know why they're bad. When I look at USC, I'm like, I don't get Lincoln Riley has been this really good offensive head coach for the better part of a decade now. And he's either stopped and said this and done nothing about it, or he's never stopped and said, why do I not commit more to defense? And it is so puzzling to me, Lugs. Yeah. It has probably prevented him from winning a national championship and will continue to do so until he commits to it more.
Well, not only that, it's prevented him from winning a semifinal game.
Yeah, a semifinal game even. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, the writing is on the wall. And we're not saying that you got to be Georgia on defense.
No, just be better than average.
With that offense, if you're competent, if you can get some stops on third down, make a couple of plays here and there. Because remember, we said this going back to the summer. They aren't going to be plus 22 in turnover margin this year like they were a year ago. So it's going to make things worse because it's going to be even more over magnified. And so, I don't see – there's a blind spot there. There's no doubt. I think Lincoln Riley's the best – he and Steve Sarkisian are the best play callers in college football.
I agree.
And it's effortless. It's easy for him. He does a great job with the quarterbacks. They've got tremendous personnel on the offensive side of the football. But just imagine if you went out and you got the equivalent of a Zachariah Branch in a corner.
Right.
You got the you got the equivalent of an elite level player in Caleb Williams, and he's at defensive end for you on defense. Like a handful. Give me 10. Like 10 that are in your rotational 2 and 3 deep. And they just, for whatever reason, it doesn't seem to be any point of emphasis.
I can't imagine Drew Pine having done that to me and then scanning the rest of that conference and knowing I've still got to face Michael Penix and Cam Ward and Bo Nix and Shedeur Sanders this week. I mean, I look at all those quarterbacks in that conference, and I know I got a good one.
Yeah.
But my defense is going to have to face some of those other ones. I don't know. I mean, it's going to be a shootout every single week for them now.
Yeah, it really is. And then, obviously they're going to run into a bit of a defensive buzzsaw when they got to play a team like Utah.
That's right.
It's really, really good.
Yep.
Oregon State to some degree. Washington, Oregon, all of them. And, this week on the road, like, could they score 60 on Colorado? Absolutely they could.
Yeah.
Colorado score 50 on them?
Yep.
Probably
Absolutely
so.
They could. Yeah.
So, like we've talked about for the last 3 to 4 weeks, these one-possession games that are going to start occurring every single week in that conference. We saw it with Washington State and Oregon State, right? One-possession game with Utah. It wasn't high scoring, but it was Utah and UCLA. UCLA goes in there with a freshman quarterback. So when we start seeing these teams, if Cam Rising gets back for Utah, look out for them, right? So it's going to be interesting to see how this conference shakes itself out because it's hard for me to fathom that somebody could go through that conference and come out unscathed.
Yeah, I don't think I'm not certain anybody gets out of there with less than 2 losses. Even I mean,
that could very well be the case, and that team could be really, really good, like really good,
right?
And have 2 losses.
Yeah, I mean, your nightmare scenario for them is going to be you get a team that skates through maybe with a loss, and they're right in the college football playoff picture, and then they're going to have to play an amazing team in the championship game, and lose, and everybody's got 2 losses. And the weird thing is, as the Pac-12 goes out of the picture here, they're going to have their best year ever, and they're probably going to be too good for their own good. I mean, it's like they can't even get being good right in the Pac-12.
It's a horrible script, right? It really
is.
The worst script. It's the worst possible thing that could have come out of this summer is what's happening on the field right now.
It's wild. All right, thank you to our sponsors for ball, mybookie.ag, code next round to get that sign-up bonus of 110% right now this week only when you use code next round at mybookie.ag. Bet anything, anytime, anywhere, mybookie.ag. A great pairing with them is going and getting all the plays every single day from lanceslock.com. Single day packages available, weekly, monthly, full season packages. He's been tearing it up in the NFL and college football. Get those winners at lanceslock.com. Pair them up there at mybookie.ag and make some money this football season. And don't forget TNR20 at roback.com to save 20% off your initial order. All right, enjoy what used to be the Carrier Dome there in Syracuse. Luke, we'll see you next time.
Will do, man. Have a great week. Thank you, brother.